and welcome to another California Guy video with your boy California Guy. Before I get started, I need you guys to check out Amos Wilson. He was a black intellectual, and he was a psychologist, and he taught a lot about African American social issues. And what I'm doing is taking a page from one of his speeches about white crimes in the ghetto, you know. So I'm basically taking from him. So again, I need you guys to check out Amos Wilson. Now, for a decade post Civil War, there's been this myth going into modern day United States where they talk about black people in the ghetto, and they say that the ghettos were created for black people, when in turn the ghettos were really made for Irish, Italians, and Jews back then, back in the 19th century. Back then, Irish mob ruled Brooklyn. They ruled Brooklyn, New York. And the Irish were immigrants at one point. They immigrated in the early to mid 19th century. And a lot of them bought gangs and crimes that came with them. Prostitution, all these different things. So the federal government began to start cracking down on the Irish gangs, just like Italians that immigrated to America also late 19th century going into the 20th century. So Amos Wilson was basically explaining that black people think that they created like ghettos and juvenile courts and welfare all was created for black people, which is not the case. Black people around that time, black people were slaves. That's number one. Black people were slaves. So a lot of laws that came to be after slavery ended was due to us working as a people. Now, I can't speak for black people in modern day, but let's talk about the 19th century and these white gangsters. The blacks, when slavery ended, we were kind of in a position of not having land, so the federal government helped blacks to get farms and different things like that. The problem with that was that white people, Southerners, had a problem with black people getting land and using the federal government for that. We wanted land not to sit on our asses, but to work and make money. Whereas in the inner cities, Jews, Irish, and Italians were committing crimes, mainly the Irish around that time. 1865, Irish people lynched over 100 black people in New York City over jobs. They killed black people, they lynched them. And now, mind you, these people were looked down upon by white Americans as pieces of shit. But instead, they looked down at black people as even lower than the average Irish person at that time. I'm not saying Irish are like that, all Irish people are like that today, but I'm just talking about then. There are a lot of Irish that were racist. A lot of foreigners were always racist towards African Americans. But because the Irish were so out of control at that time, drinking, they had brothels, they had little girls in the street, like the great Amos Wilson said, that they started to set up institutions for these Irish, Italians, and Jewish people. The word ghetto comes from Jews, because a lot of Jewish people were poor at the time. They were very, very poor. Now, the difference between immigration of those three subculture groups, the government set them up, whereas African American people at the time was getting, they purposely was taking away stuff. They didn't create stuff for African American people. Actually, we was benefiting from the farm parts and opening our own businesses and bakeries, restaurants. Black people was doing all kinds of things around that timeline. It's just that after Reconstruction period, they set up laws, which was Jim Crow, to get black people not to make money and be independent. So they took away voting rights and all that. So the immigrants at that time, which was Jews, Polish, Germans, and I think Germans immigrated in the early 20th century, but they created juvenile courts, YMCAs, and you guys can look it up and go to Amos Wilson, and he goes more deeper into this. But like he said, you don't look at just black history, you look at U.S. history, because it'll tell you that, you know, the ghettos and welfare all came from poor white people. Now, welfare, let's go down to welfare real quick too. Welfare even came, the ideal of welfare did not come from African Americans. Welfare came because of the Depression era. It came from post World War One veterans being poor and post World War Two. So when Franklin Roosevelt set up the government programs around the 30s, it was for poor whites. Again, it wasn't for poor blacks because, again, black people had independence. A lot of black people, we migrated from the South to the big cities because of racism. So when blacks got to the big cities, we were trying to do jobs on the railroad, and we was doing different jobs like that. I'm not saying blacks didn't do crimes either and wasn't at speakeasies, but a lot of the time we built our own community because of segregation. So with segregation came more of a buildup of our community. So whereas the immigrants, like Italians committed crimes. Italians came over from Italy committing crimes also. And so again, that's why you had the FBI. That was the creation of the FBI, the Treasury Department, and all these different programs came because the mafia started to take hold of the United States in the early 20th century. Or actually all through the 20th century. You know, they had prostitutes, they had speakeasies, they were drinking. Shit, they controlled the blacks, believe it or not. Italians controlled black crime in the ghettos, believe it or not. And we were here longer than them. So, you know, I need you guys to check out that video with Amos Wilson. And you guys, we as the people got to stop blaming ourselves for like ghettos and saying it's a black thing, when really our people was making achievements at that time. Even in Jim Crow and pre-Jim Crow, we was making achievements during that point in time. And the coons and white supremacy, they're basically saying that we had nothing to offer to the United States, or that we didn't aspire for anything, when these subgroups was the reason why you had the creation of juvenile halls, CPS, and all these other things, because they were unruly at that point in time. So I just thought to share some history. Like and share this video, people. Let's have some good conversations. Let's talk about history. Peace out.